The sun shining through my window told me it was time to wake up. I looked outside at the beautiful city of Pompeii, and it looked nice out. I couldn't wait to go play outside. Out the window I saw the big mountain and a bunch of people, shopping and talking. There was a gladiator battle today that I wanted to watch, but my mom says a gladiator fight is no place for a 10-year-old girl. During the morning I worked on homework while my little sister raced around the house making a lot of noise. Mom was washing her clothes and getting lunch ready. Dad was probably walking home from work. He was a fisherman. I hope Dad caught a bunch of fish for lunch. If he didn't catch any, he might be grumpy and make us do chores. Dad soon arrived with a huge barrel full of shrimp and with a big smile on his face. My little sister and I were happy because that meant we would get to play outside after lunch. During lunch, we talked about the usual boring stuff. Mom and Dad asked us questions about what we were learning about at school and stuff like that. Finally, our stomachs were full, and my sister and I were headed towards the door. "Stop!" my dad yelled. We both froze. Oh, great. Now Dad probably wants us to watch him clean the fish or something. My sister thought all the fish guts were yucky, and I didn't like them either. They were slimy and disgusting. I didn't want to be a fisherman anyway. I wanted to be the first girl gladiator champion. "Girls, help me clean these fish, would you please?" I looked at my sister, then walked towards Dad and his annoying fish guts. As Dad chopped the fish, my sister looked like she was going to puke. I just stood there and watched, but I was annoyed. As Dad was talking about the fish, a strange rumble came through our open windows. Dad stopped talking and looked up. All three of us looked at each other, then looked out the window at the mountain by our city. The mountain had always been there, but we never paid much attention to it. It was just a normal, boring mountain to me. Now it looked like the mountain was coming alive. The sound and the feel of the rumble scared me a little. My dad, who was always calm, looked nervous. Seeing my dad like this made me even more scared. My little sister tugged on my shirt. "What is happening?" I told her to be quiet and listen. My mom entered the room and she looked really scared. The four of us went to the window facing the mountain and watched a bunch of black smoke and ashes start coming out of the top and spreading all over. All the ash and smoke made it look like nighttime. The mountain continued to shoot out ash and smoke, so I turned to my dad. "Daddy, what is happening?" He looked at me with a very serious look, then told me to follow him. We raced out back to get some boards to cover our windows and doors to keep out all the ash. As we were gathering whatever boards we could find, we began coughing because there was so much smoke and ash. After we got the first board up, we heard a huge explosion. We looked toward the mountain, and it was way different. The top was missing. The whole peak had been blown off in the explosion. The explosion caused a lot more smoke and ash to fall on our city. Everything was getting covered. I began to notice a different sound coming from outside. It sounded like rocks hitting our roof. Even though my dad and I put boards on the windows, the ash and smoke still got into our house. As a family, we gathered together and sat down on the floor, not knowing what else to do. We couldn't leave the house because a huge pile of ash was blocking our door. We were trapped, and it didn't seem like the storm was going to stop. My mom was really shaky bad, but she managed to light a lamp so we could at least see each other. I was getting even more scared because my dad said we were trapped in our house. My 4-year-old sister started to cry because she was really scared. As we sat on the floor together, we could hear the ash and rock continue to pour down on our city. We huddled closer together as we listened to our neighbors scream for help. Women were screaming. Babies were screaming. Even the men were screaming. I couldn't move. I was so scared from hearing the terrifying screams. Huge crashes continued to shake our house. One crash that we heard was an entire building caving in. Everyone inside it was getting buried. I hope that doesn't happen to us. Hearing our buried neighbor scream for help was more than my mom could take. She started screaming that she didn't want to die. Soon, we could no longer hear our neighbors. The screaming stopped, which meant they were probably dead. The light coming from the lamp was just strong enough so I could see my mom and dad. They looked really scared and were both crying. I had never seen them like this before. The screaming and shouting from the neighbors had stopped right as the second large crashing sound happened. We could hear people screaming names, trying to find their children, trying to find mothers or fathers. We heard other people screaming at the gods, praying for help. As the smoke and ash continued to fill up our house, breathing became very painful. It felt like concrete was pouring into our lungs, preventing them from opening and closing. Each breath was a struggle. Each swallow was like gulping fire. I looked at my mom, dad, and sister. We all knew that we would not make it out alive. We decided to lay down on the floor and spend our last moments close together. I was right next to my mom, so I looked at her and said it would be okay. I was trying to be brave because that's what my dad would want me to be. I gave my mom a big hug, but she didn't hug me back. I pulled away and looked at my mom. Her lifeless eyes stared back at me like I was a stranger. My mom died because the ash suffocated her to death. She looked like she was just sleeping, but I knew she wasn't. I wiped away my tears, still trying to be brave. I whispered, "I love you," then turned away from the dead body. I scooted close to my dad and little sister. They huddled together, not knowing my mom had died. My father was whispering to my sister that everything would be okay. I knew he was lying. He was just trying to make my sister feel better. My little sister lay whimpering alongside my dad. I took my sister's hand into my own. Her soft, delicate little hand clutched mine. Her tender cheeks were streaked black from her ash-stained tears. I knew she was scared. In the next moment, I felt my little sister's hand let go mine. Her arm fell off to the side. My dad snuggled closer to her lifeless body, as if not wanting to accept the fact that my sister had just died. My dad let out a horrifying scream, then started crying. He turned toward me. He told me goodbye, and he loved me, and he was proud of me to be brave. I started to cry really hard because I didn't want my dad to die too. My dad took his last breath of ash-filled air and suffocated to death. My dad had now joined my mother and little sister, leaving me in my house all alone. The screaming and shouting from the neighbors had stopped. The only sound was that of the mountain, continuing to rain destruction down on our city. I crawled to the corner of the room. I crouched down, put my hands together, and bowed my head. I still tried to be brave for my dad. I knew the same thing would happen to me. That happened to my mom, dad, and sister. I was really scared, but I also was mad at the mountain that was destroying our city. As I crouched in the corner with my head down, I no longer had the energy to fight for breath. As ash and rock continued to cover the city, I gave up. The whole world was dying with me in it. There would be no shrimp supper, there would be no gladiator games, there would be no Pompeii. As I put my pencil and paper down, I thought to myself that I hope someone finds this story so we aren't forgotten. I shall now take my final breath.